where we bring you the latest conversations. You are today witnessing a vision where TV meets radio. And right here on set, before I even introduce the guests, I want to appreciate CT from the Situation Room on Spice FM. It's very good to have you on TV with us today, just to catch up on the current affairs.
Thank you very much for the invite, and thank you very much for the acknowledgement.
Oh, absolutely. My name is Anki Dorisombat, with us as we discuss the current affairs, the status quo of the country, but more specifically, public participation matters, accountability, citizen involvement. I want to appreciate very key, guests in studio. Of course, he was very clear on his, his name. You start with Adenga Dan Paul, who is a development practitioner with experience in civic education and budget facilitation. But the greatest umbrella here is Uraia. Thank you very much for creating time, Dan.
Thank you, thank you. Happy to be here.
A lot of people would say there's more to that.
Sure.
And we'll come back to, perhaps you can tell us more on that. But let me just quickly appreciate Caroline, who is a governance expert. Caroline Nyamu is a governance and human rights specialist with a strong interest in social accountability work. Thank you, Caroline, for creating time to be here as well.
It's a delight to be here. Thank you.
Maybe I'll start with you. You just tell us more about what Caroline is about. I know there's that key interest in social accountability as we begin this conversation.
Sure. Thank you very much. Social accountability is something that's been close to my heart because it's very much around citizens using the Constitution to realize the aspirations. And it's at the heart of what we'll be speaking about today, public participation. So the face of public participation, citizens going, engaging on what priorities are being set in their communities, what projects are being done, how they're being done, and holding the government to account. So this is work that I've done for a while. I used to do this with Uraia, and now I do this independently, working with community organizations to help them to realize their aspirations.
Indeed, help them realize their aspirations. And just mentioning that you were doing this with the Uraia before you went solo, let's hear more about Uraia. DP, welcome again. Tell us a little bit more. I know it's a continuation from what you have been doing, but let's familiarize with the viewer.
So basically, picking up from what Ekaro has said is the whole issue of how do the members of the public participate meaningfully. And for purposes of today, we are specifically looking at the SIGs, special interest groups, and the way they are supposed to participate in participatory budgeting processes, and of course, so that their voices is heard as well. So that's why we are here.
Great, and we are commencing officially. City, the most favorite part of what you do is the proverb of the day. What's the proverb today?
Well, our proverbs for the whole of this week come from the Republic of Angola. Angola, as you may well know, is the 7th largest country on the continent of Africa. Now, when you say 7th, somebody will ask you, so what's the largest? Well, the largest is Algeria. And then you might ask, what's the smallest? The smallest is the Seychelles. Okay? Now, those who are Kenyans will ask me, okay, we've heard all that. It's very good, thank you very much, but where do Kenyans come in? Well, that's your homework, figure it out. You'll find out where Kenya comes in since you're a Kenyan, and then let us know. Now, for the proverb. When walking with a squirrel, you learn to climb a tree, but you also learn to steal.
Oh. All right.
Okay, let me repeat it. When walking with a squirrel, you learn to climb a tree, but you also learn to steal.
Exactly.
Yes, precisely.
Precisely.
Now, what we'd like our guests to do is to try and tell us how they resonate with this proverb. What do you think the writers of this proverb were trying to put across? But more importantly, how do you relate to this particular proverb?
Perhaps, Caroline?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking. I mean, it's it makes me think when two people cannot walk together unless they agree. So the squirrel will teach you new skills. Some of them sound like they're pretty useful, like climbing trees, stealing. So I'm wondering, is it, watch the company you keep? And we're not wholly good and we're not wholly bad.
Okay.
We're not wholly good and wholly bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know what DP has to say.
I don't know. What seems to strike my mind is a collective responsibility. But then the question is how? Collective responsibility, doing what? Mm-hmm. And how are you doing that? The same thing that you want to do collectively. So you are because I am. That's what I read from that.
Okay. You see, the beauty of asking people to give us their interpretation of it, they can't possibly be wrong. And this is the beauty of Proverbs. The purposes were always integrated, and there was a multiplicity of it. To teach, to caution, to cajole, to inform, to cause humor, to bring mirth. So it's how you relate to it.
Collective responsibility.
Well, it's a good thing, collective responsibility. It's a good point for me to now segue into our discussion this morning, isn't it?
And there we have it. Even when we have a democratic country as ours, which means, the people have a say, sovereign power, and we also do have governance that has to align with the vision of the country. We're looking at a very, they call it historic moment. And of course, this is now the third week, I believe, if we're to look at it that way, of the demonstrations. They're saying they're going back on a full shutdown, but a lot of things have happened, City. We have had changes, twists and turns, including first, deleting 20 clauses for the amendments, and then the withdrawing of the finance bill. We moved from Occupy Parliament to Occupy State House. Now Ruto must go. DP, there have been questions, and I also want to hear from Caroline here, on all this began from ignoring public participation. People feeling like they're not involved in very key issues, including budget making and the finance bill. Look at it today and the twists and turns. What would you have to say?
And it didn't start 3 weeks ago or 2 months ago. This is emblematic of a long history of government just not listening. And sometimes I say it's a little bit like the playground bully. They steal your, snack, your 10 o'clock snack today, and you let it go. Tomorrow they'll steal your lunch. The following day they'll steal your bus fare. And so we have gotten to this place where there's nothing else to rob me. And so I've got to fight back, or, you're going to take my life. So what we're seeing is people who've been pushed to the wall with, a government that, does not listen. And this is just following on from previous governments. You will recall so many instances of things like, government disobeying court orders, passing laws without, public participation. So where we are at is citizens just saying, look, we've had enough. We've had enough. You've taken all that you can from us. I mean, the only thing remaining is to take our lives. And I think we will not, enough.
Push to the wall.
Yes.
You started by saying, DP, that meaningful participation, not just participation. There are Kenyans who have actually purported that we do have public participation in the Constitution, but it's pretty much cosmetic. And speaking of those special interest groups to now just bring you closer home, I believe there's a women, youth, persons with disability. Because someone even asked, as people are going to the streets with all these water cannons, where's the person with disability? I saw an image of a man on a wheelchair was actually in one of these protests. Where is their place in this awareness?
Before I address what you have just said, but I wanted to first of all give a rider to what Comrade has spoken about. is where are we and why are we behaving the way seems to be the case now?
Right.
And for a long time, it has assumed the case that Kenyans don't quite read, and they also don't listen, and they don't act. And allow me to go further in the act. They say Kenyans are more reactive as opposed to proactive. So what we are seeing, the outflow on the streets of Nairobi in some corner of nowhere is no more reactive now, is now being proactive. So that's what I call public participation at the best. And I say that because the main perpetrators or the main pushers of the game are members of the SIG, the youth, or the youthful nation. You like to call them Gen Z? I would call them Generation Z, if that is fine.
All right.
So, for a long time, I think the political elite have thought that the populace actually don't understand what the laws that govern this country are. They have always imagined that Kenyans, like has been the story for more than many decades, that we don't read. But the Kenyan populace has taken books they have read. And people have, done sessions on public participation and their rights, including, but not even limited to, where those rights are limited. Well, if you look at the first protest that we had on Tuesday, it was glamour. I mean, nobody would have expected anybody walking to the streets and no scar, no building, nothing, no fires. And so was Thursday. That was an open door. It was a trigger. It was something that has found Kenyans, and more specifically the political elite, completely out of the normal. So as we sit here today, they're asking themselves, so what next? I'm not sure even in terms of planning, the plans are working as would have been expected. In fact, early today, at 4 o'clock, I woke up and I realized that the TSC, you remember what the TSC, not the TSC, the SRG.
All right.
Salaries
Remuneration
Commission. You remember what they had there? Mm-hmm. That process, when did it begin? A while ago, isn't it?
Yes, it did.
And so for them, they didn't read or they have not been able to read the signs of the nation and decided to go further to make their proposals real. What happened? Public. So it means that Kenya is not the Kenya of yesterday. We are living in a complete new Kenya. But for purposes of this session today, SIGs need a special blend where we are saying, for example, that even as we were speaking about the two-thirds because of the marginalization of the women, I think we need to have enough regulations and enough laws that enable the process.
So what you're saying is we do not have enough laws.
Even if we had enough laws, they are not as enabling. So they must enable the SIGs to practice what they must practice, for example.
Can you talk more about this? When you say enabling, for instance, if one were to ask, how does this manifest? What exactly would we see that would then instruct us that, yes, this particular legal structure is actually enabling? What would we need to see?
So, assuming that we use a case for the PWDs, for example, must the PWDs be nominated to Parliament every time? Do you think that should be the case? I don't think so. I mean, being disabled is not being enabled. You understand? They're simply abled differently. And we have people who are able differently in Parliament, and they were able to get into Parliament just like any other person.
So the election process?
Election process. So a few of those acts, a few of those sections of the act, of the Election Act, need to be conducive, enabling,
But let me ask you the question. That view that you say is progressive, and it is what should be done. In fact, I would say that is aspirational. if you are to ask the common citizen of this country, common means everybody, not just those in high offices, what their view on people living with disabilities should be. The writers of our Constitution understood that there are certain members of our society who, for them to participate meaningfully, you need to have positions that are not only created, but affirmative action has to be put in place.
Precisely.
Because in the absence of that affirmative action, they will not be considered.
Precisely.
And women fell into that same bracket. Because the role of women is clear. It is clear when you look at what they do on a daily basis in this country and how it is without their support, the nation as we see it would not exist.
It wouldn't.
But it needed, again, affirmative action for women to be given an opportunity to actually, for people to see what they can do. Okay, now, if we've had a period of time when this has been the norm, and you say, okay, we've now seen it, let us now move on, let's normalize this, I would agree with you. But right now, it's a little too early. People haven't embraced disability. We look at our own buildings. We look at the way we treat people living with disabilities. We haven't embraced it. There's a journey we need to go through before we can get to a point where we can say disability has been integrated and it has been normalized in our society. As of now, it has not been normalized.
Including in the infrastructure as well.
Yes, it has not been.
Just to add to what you have said,
Yes.
That disability has not been normalized.
Yes.
It's basically telling the populace that the youth, the constituents of the youth, until yesterday was not normalized.
That is true.
So if we still need to wait until that comes to the able differently, and therefore the women, then you can imagine what Kenya is waiting for.
And I mean, and we had this conversation last week. Remember, they're not just special interest groups. They're people who are previously marginalized. They were on the margins of society. And I completely agree with you, Siti, that there needs to be, affirmative action. And the Constitution envisaged that. I think where the gap is the goodwill or the political will to make this happen. If it was important, if something is important to you, you move heaven and earth. You do what needs to be done to get it done.
I just want to interject a bit, talking about political goodwill, because, of course, they say they put up tents. A number of members of parliament, who I am seeing here on page 3 of one of the dailies, saying they fear to visit constituents, spoke on a televised interview, said they went back to their people. They involved their people. We saw a number of, people travel for public participation, give their submissions. What exactly do you mean, goodwill of the political class?
So they spoke to their people, but then they still went to Parliament and voted for the finance bill. Is that what we're talking about now?
It defeats logic, isn't it?
But think about it, and I'm glad they've said they spoke to the people. Did they listen to their people?
Well, that's the thing.
That they spoke, that we get.
Yeah.
And they speak all the time.
Yeah, but
And and what we're discussing now and what we are witnessing is the cumulative effect of their speaking as opposed to listening.
So they don't listen.
Yes.
And yet, I mean, of all the roles that, we know, we said a lot of people, hopefully, know that the member of parliament is a representative.
Yes.
I mean, the Kiswahili word couldn't capture it better. Ni mjumbe.
Yes.
They take a message and they take it back.
Yes.
They take the message from the citizens, they bring it to parliament, and then they come in. So exactly how did they exercise their representation responsibility? By talking to the people and then still coming and disregarding. If they listened, it seems rather clear that there was no listening. Or very little of it.
But even if they listen too clearly, like seems to be the case, and they got into parliament and their work was basically not to legislate, how comes and I don't want to quote names, that a few of them were seen in public glamour, and they said the document that was being read to them was so voluminous that they didn't read everything. So they only voted in because they thought it was a yes and a yes. I mean, how does that become the
Does it seem like a narrative we hear last year as well, 2023, during the debate of the Finance Bill 2023? You started by saying Kenyans have been purported to be not very good fans of reading. But when you represent, you need to read.
Even further.
Yeah.
And how do you do public participation?
Without
What do you tell
reading.
the people when you speak to your people if you have not read this in entirety? I want to talk about the capacity building. All right, and programs, because part of what we're doing here is civic education as well.
Yes.
And even as you're talking about the SIGs, and what I know here is we're talking about what capacity building initiatives and educational programs, to be just very serious as a country, are necessary to ensure that we understand the governance processes. Because you saw the people who are going to TikTok. Some would say that's wrong information, this is misinformation. I think we should talk about this. The how we actually do public participation.
Well, the how moment is with us here, wouldn't you say? Because the very things that were not envisioned, nothing that is happening now had been envisioned. So when we talk of preparedness, those who were supposed to be prepared were clearly caught flat-footed because they didn't anticipate it, they didn't expect it. But also, it means that when we enter the communication age, when we enter the 21st century, some of them forgot to move and actually join the 21st century. Because if people are communicating and in your mind you still think that there needs to be some rally in some public place for you to speak to people, it is that same thinking that makes you say that this group are leaderless. Because you think you need someone to stand on a rostrum or a podium to speak. They are podiums. They are gatherings. The only thing is they're not physical.
Exactly.
As for meetings, there are voices that are listened to more than others. And those voices don't even need to be in the country. So people who live on that particular solar system, they understand exactly what's going on. They are communicating every day. They are clear about the directions. It's the rest of us. The term we used to use as analog is the rest of us who are still stuck in the 20th century, who are playing catch up.
And I think I would add to that. This week I was having a conversation with some Gen Zs, and they were asking a lot of questions. So like, okay, fine, now that the finance bill has been withdrawn, so now what next? What do we do? And I also want to know, what's the job of my member of parliament? I was very surprised to hear that chiefs still exist. What is their role? What do they do? If I wanted to speak to my member of parliament, can I just call him to come to our local, playground and talk to us? Where do I find him? Is it okay if I call them? I think that's where, if we're going to do public education, civic education, that's where it needs to start. It can't be, how you go to primary school, I guess now it's different. I don't know what you call school these days.
Let's call it school.
School.
Yes.
And you start with grade 1 or grade 0.
Yes, that's it.
You're on the right 1
track.
plus 1,
There's
1 plus
junior
2,
secondary.
and then,
Yes, exactly. You're
and
good.
then, by the time you get to class 3, you're doing algebra, and it has to, you have to move away from the formulaic and meet people where they are at. And I have a friend, he has I hope I can remember the line. He has a very good line. He says, every day is a budget day. Every issue is a budget issue. And every person is a budget actor. I think that's what he says. So whatever people are talking about today, whatever is of primary concern is a budget issue. And it will find its way in our public budgets. So how do we tailor our conversations to make them, with civic education, public participation, how do we tailor them to be budget discussions? The fact that I go to the local health center or the local dispensary, I can't get medicines or I can't see a doctor, how is that a budget issue? Okay. the fact that my child is having to walk 7 kilometers to go to the nursery school, early childhood center, how do I make that a budget issue and therefore kind of instigate a sense of urgency that I need to be in that budget discussion that determines where nursery schools, and that's a laziness on my part, kindergarten, are going to be constructed. And how do I get into what conversations, what spaces do I need to get into to make sure that there are drugs in my health facility, instead of, and we really want to move from this narrative of serikali saidia. You're the boss.
No, as Carol speaks to the how and trying to, so that we have a whole cycle.
Yes.
And using the budget as a strategy, budget making process as a strategy to effective public engagement for that matter. I like telling people wherever I go that please organize yourself. You can only speak to something that you are part of. The generalities have led us to where we are, because people have always assumed that Kenyans will just look at you at face value and period. People need to get organized. And I'll give you a case. Using education, because she has used education. Mm-hmm. And did she call it nursery? Allow me to call it early child care.
Okay.
It's okay. Now, there is a policy framework, a government policy framework, that speaks to the guides that inform what a construction of a classroom should look like. Now, how many Kenyans have an idea what it should look like? It is 8 by 6 meters. And the composition should have 25, to be precise, 25 of the kindergartens. And even there are the specifications for the kind of seats those kids need to have. I mean, how many of us are interested in that? Or do we only pick our kids and drop them? And that's fine. I think we have come of age when we need to get organized at a specific area, organized at a specific sector level. Then that way, public participation would be meaningful. You know, when we get into an uproar and say, your salary has been increased, the question should be, why should your salary be increased? For what purpose are you serving us for your salary to be increased? Mm. I mean, why should we pay, for example, are they called the ECD teachers or the junior secondary school, 14,000, and someone takes home 1 million? I mean, what is the rationale? So until we get to that point in time, these others would be hula baloo.
I think what I also just wanted to bring in, and like Siti, alluded to earlier on, things are changing so fast. Mm. We need to move with the times. Mm. And one thing that caught my attention through these 3 weeks, if I would put it, of Generation Z, of course they're on the forefront, but the rest of Kenyans joined them, is how social media blew our minds. Mm. Absolutely and totally. Citi said they're used to, people sitting on pulpits and raising, their voices, or probably, there's been a war of words here and there. But this X spaces, I'm talking about in terms of capacity building, the Generation X literally have shown us the power of social media. Yes. Can we use it to our advantage?
Sure.
And how?
Actually, it's being used before our very eyes. If we choose to close our eyes and not see, then we won't see it. But look, right now, if you look at our voters, those who are eligible to vote, this youthful population that we refer to comprise 67%. So they can decide who it is they want to govern, 67%. If you talk about information, telephone subscription in this country is 118%, 118%. Okay? There's 60 million phones in this country and we're only 56 million. So it means there are people who have more than one phone. Now, the communication age isn't waiting for us. It's actually here, and it's moving along swiftly, very, very swiftly. Now, those who are enjoying and benefit from it are those who understand it and have latched on. Again, this age group are the people who have latched on and they are actually utilizing it. You're talking about understanding and reading. Have we not witnessed the finance bill being broken down in communal languages? Have we not seen it being summarized so for easy consumption? So public education, as we watch, has taken a completely different turn.
Completely.
So what does it mean? The elected member of parliament stands a chance of being irrelevant as the purveyor of information to the public. Because this very public have decided and determined they are going to inform themselves. Why? Because from among the members of this youthful public are people who are educated in very many disciplines. So they're using their training and their discipline to pass across the messages that they think are critical. And specifically, they've decided to engage. Previously, they were disengaged, completely disengaged. Now they are engaged. Now, the question that should be at the forefront of our minds, moving forward, and here moving forward swiftly, what is this engagement going to mean? Remember, 80% of our population in this country are below the age of 30. Okay, so that is something that one should consider. This group of citizens have understood they have the power. Now that should be a scary thing.
It is.
If you think you are in power, because this group has understood. Now, what are they going to do with it?
And they are doing it. I mean, it's Siti, you were talking about just expanding on the finance bill, and just using that same social media. Somebody said, "Hang on, do you know that there's another law about land, and your land is going to be taken?" And the tables have turned. A couple of years, well, not even a couple of years ago. Up until maybe 3 weeks ago, people like Dan Paul and I were struggling with things like accessing information from government, because government tends to be very opaque and very, as one young lady in Eldoret said, very mean with the information and truth. And now they're highlighting some of the things that are going on that, legislators or those who hold power do not want citizens to know. So what's happening is that there is, because of the varied or the diverse interests, this information is now being made public, and people are then saying what needs to be done. And I think that law was actually pulled back, or it's under review or something like that. So it does actually say that we need to be very deliberate or very strategic now, using this kind of expanded space to demand for information, to have these conversations that rather than wait for my local MCA to call me for a meeting, come for my meeting.
You see, the opportunity for them to join exists. Again, the decision-making process of there's a change here. What do I do with it? How do I plug myself into this change? Because this change isn't going to be reversed.
No, it may not. The reverse psychology.
Not even may not. It will actually not be reversed.
Irreversible.
No, it's not reversible. Not this one. The people who say there's a clawing back, not so. The clawing back is possible when those who actually understand that they are the ones who are the employers have fully understood their mandate and their role. Before, when they're asleep, yes, you can claw back anything.
Yeah, but people are awake
But
now.
when they're awake, you have it's a tall order.
Yeah. Some would actually say they're woke.
Yeah.
And I want to hear from DP here, because the accountability really, because I know we've spoken about, there's certain things that this particular group of people, and Kenyans to be specific, have proposed the president should do, including touching on his own cabinet. But you see, the Constitution of Kenya is clear on accountability. Article 153 on the decisions you make, responsibility and accountability of the cabinet individually and collectively. I mean, even these are discussions we need to have.
Sure.
How do we, like he said, plug and be part of the solution? And as far as the public participation is concerned, you're not just waiting for the action to be taken. You want to be part of this conversation. How do other Kenyans flow with these proposals, give their points of view? How does it get to the president? Remember the different, blame games that came when the protests, or someone has not really informed the president, so he was not at par with the people. all these kind of conversations. But now we want a solution. What way forward, after this?
So the way I look at it, from where I sit, we have an opportunity where the Gen Z, who constitute, did you say 67%?
Yeah. The voting, I'm talking about those who are eligible to vote in that particular bracket of people we refer to as youth, 67%.
As I sit here this morning, I am positive because I heard the president of this great country, I forgot his name, but the president of this great country, say in one of the interviews that was held a while ago that the Electoral and Boundaries Commission would have the commissioners appointed for that matter. I say that because I would want to see those who qualify to be voters registered as voters. That is entry number one. This is a political space. In the political space, you got to get that entry, the visa code, to get into the political space. One of it is the electoral card. So I'm looking forward that immediately the commissioners the commission is constituted, and pretty so, and then of course the rest of the matter would be a thing of the past. My call to the Gen Z is to register in large numbers because I know they can. The Gen Zs, the women, and the people with disabilities. For me, is they register as voters in large numbers. Meaning what? If they register in large numbers, then they have opportunities to get the space of leadership. My catch-22 now here is, so who is that will get into leadership? What is it that we have put inside of this person who will get into leadership after what we have gone through? Because history, for students of history who are here, and I'm sure Doc understand this much better than we do, is many times those who have agitated for change, many times don't end up into bringing about that change themselves. Unfortunately, that is the case.
Why do you think that happens?
Maybe you can tell us.
No.
As a historian.
Well, as somebody who studied history,
yes.
I'm not really a historian, and who continues to study history. Remember, those who agitate for change want to see certain things happen. So, given that they're human beings, when that happens, they figure their job is done.
Can you imagine?
Well, yes. I mean, if, for instance, throughout the ages, talking about, let's start with the 70s, then 80s, then 90s. You get to a point where you then have a constitution. You're only human, you'd feel, you know something. I think we've done what we wanted to do. So, once, and remember, I started from the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yes.
You're talking about 3 decades down the line. By the time you get into the 2000, the new millennium, and somebody has been at it all that time, at some point they will feel, I've actually done my bit. Now, so the question I would be asking is, how exactly do we inculcate this knowledge that we've had, or the collection of knowledge that we have, so that those who now are at the forefront of change actually understand it? Because if you talk Kenyatta 1, they have no clue what you're talking about. That's history. Moi, again, history. Even Kibaki, for some of them, is okay, history.
Yeah,
Probably.
Recent history is Uhuru Kenyatta, and now present. You see? The only reason why someone like Raila Odinga is still current is because he's been in all these discussions except Kenyatta 1. One sees him as a constant. But the point is, what is it that you feel that the younger citizens have learned? I'm asking this question because many people who listen have young people in their homes.
Yeah.
Do they actually listen to these young people in their homes?
Sure.
Listen, as in saying, look, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'd like you to talk to me about this and tell me, explain to me. Let me understand where you're coming from, what you're thinking.
Yeah, and I'm coming to that because because of time. You spoke about going out and voting because that's the power you have. But you know that over time, there's been the apathy You know, there's been the trust deficit. And even if you hear, the question has been, when will you stop doing this? You are making us lose confidence day and day. And I want to appreciate what, City has said. Decades, we're looking at a whole pattern here. And talking to someone earlier on today, City, someone, asked me, DP and Caroline, there is pro and cons of each government. Maybe if we start with the realization of, is the resigning, all right, of the person in leadership, DP said, he forgot his name, would it be a solution, all right, entirely? And you just told us a proverb, the squirrel will teach you two things. To climb is positive, to steal, I'm not sure it's very positive. How do you work around that, even for the generation? There's some understanding, some listening will lead us somewhere, but I'm not thinking we're at a place where there's a section that are saying, now stop it, but there's a section that's saying, press on, regardless, until we have some people in authority step down.
We have a challenge in this country. We don't vote people in, we vote people out. So I get angry. Well,
exactly.
I mean,
thank you.
In 2013 was the first election. In Nairobi, we voted Kidero as the governor. In 2017, we didn't vote in Sonko. We voted Kidero out.
Confirm?
Okay.
That's exactly what I was
in
thinking.
Kiambu, in Kiambu, Kabogo was the governor.
Yes.
In Kiambu, we did not vote Waititu in. We voted Kabogo out. Well,
are you saying that if we look at the votes,
the pattern?
Yes, no, yes. I'm talking about numerically, the number of votes cast. They represent that disenchantment that the people of those counties had with the person who had held that seat.
Exactly.
I see.
But I don't think that should be the mentality, because you're coming, and there's a place for frustration and anger.
Okay.
But then how do you actually harness it? In the intervening period, this years between 2022 and 2027, see it as a job interview for your member of parliament. What are they doing in terms of representing you? How are they performing? What are they doing in the way of exercising oversight? What questions are they asking the executive? When they receive the audit reports from the Auditor General, what do they do with those reports? Do they ask questions of the executive? When it comes to, what's the other? So they represent the exercise oversight and they legislate.
Yes.
When it comes to making laws, what kind of laws are they making? Are they laws that help us to realize our agenda, our aspirations as persons with disability, as women, as young people? In those 5 years, what does somebody sort of get voted into parliament and then never shows up? In one of the previous governments, I think it was the MP for Ainabkoi or somewhere, and the community said, we're going to recall him because we've never had him speak in parliament, and that forced him to start speaking up. You've got to follow what this person is doing to then say, is this the person I want representing me? Organizations like Uraia do work around vetting of candidates during the election period, asking, what's the human rights record of this person who, even if they have not held office? There was a guy in Busia who the citizens said they're not going to vote for him in the party nominations because he has a record of beating up his wife. So those are the things that we're talking about, and you can use social media to raise or to amplify. Our MP has only contributed to one bill in 5 years.
Is it possible that some of the leaders who, well, when one is being voted out, happen to come in, if I'm to use your analogy, is there any place where they resonate with the electorate at some point? I'm asking this question because I'm thinking of the immediate former governor of Nairobi, and I got the distinct impression that 800,000 plus votes is a strong statement.
It is a strong statement.
Yes. So did he at some level resonate? Let me explain why I'm asking the question.
Okay.
I look at the U.S. elections and I look at how President Obama was elected. The largest voting population are white. Okay, so why did they vote for Obama? Was it guilt? Or was it an opportunity for someone to show that they are not racist? And then again, why did they vote for Trump? What is it about Trump? Is it that Trump touched a chord in them that is absolutely racist and it had the ability to manifest itself? I'm simply asking this to say the conversation about such things must be had. And an opportunity like this one brings it. Why do we vote people out and why do we allow some people in?
To come in?
That's why I'm drawing that, because like now, if you look at the election again in the US, I say this because it's the one election outside Kenya that catches the attention of the entire planet. What is it that we're actually seeing happening? And do we think that come the next election, 2027, taking in mind that perhaps more of our younger citizens will have registered, how will they vote? Who will they be voting out? And the person who will not have been voted out but comes in, will he be the person who's going to actually represent them?
That's the thing.
Because yes.
You raise important questions, City, and I don't. I mean, it would be a brilliant place for study. But remember, in Kenya, we unfortunately tend to be moved by economic issues. So if the person comes and gives me 500 shillings, that's going to be a factor. If the and our politicians know how to talk and use our language. Also, there's the whole issue of 6-piece voting. So where is the president?
Do you actually see that happening in 2027?
I think
I'm not sure that that history will be repeated ever going forward.
Why?
Because of the change narrative. There's a narrative that seems to be changing, or not changing, but emerging. What we have seen from the last 2 weeks is a statement Kenya has never heard before. So for me, it's a change narrative. And I say it's a change narrative because I've been into civic education for a decade. Yes. And the kind of things we've been talking about are exactly what is coming up. And every time you went into a session to give civic knowledge, many times we were asked, so what? How does that put bread and butter on my table? Today, they are the same who say, oh, thank you that you shared that piece of information.
Makes sense.
And I would go as far as saying that it probably won't happen, but we must not let it happen, where we actually have agency. Like, you can't sort of sit and say, oh yeah, we've learned our lessons. I had a boss who used to say, Wakenya ni wepesi wa kusahau. Okay, so this thing, wherever it will go, it might go to the end of the year, it might spill into 2025. By 2027, we will have forgotten. So we can't let, we shouldn't waste this opportunity. We have to keep reminding people, remember, you get paid, this is what you get. People who do not listen to you, people who do not act on what you're interested in or what you want, it's your dignity. So we can't just sit and say it will never happen again. We must not let it happen.
We want to close, rather. It's been a very beautiful conversation, but we have 3 arms of government. And every time something happens, there's a word dialogue in this country that sometimes doesn't come out so well. What is the role of the courts? Legal frameworks, corridors of justice. Kenyans point fingers and say the parliament has failed us. We do not like this president and his cabinet. Where is the judiciary? We have a number of protesters who were probably carrying no arms, all right, but are in custody and are waiting to be heard. And this is still in the SIG's group. You're talking about the youth, even as we conclude.
The judiciary is supposed to interpret law. To interpret law and give acquit where necessary, and where necessary, act within the core as it's stipulated. Where I sit today, I see a sort of judiciary that is compromised. I didn't say it is. I said looks like it is compromised by the executive. The ideal situation, actually, thank God that you asked me, because yesterday we were having a discussion with the NEC. I represent the Nairobi Central NEC hub on budgeting. And in our hub, in our discussion, we're asking ourselves, are these three arms independent? Are they independent? And from where I sit, honestly, not as much. Because if they were, then the legislature would not have been taken for a ride by the executive and vice versa. And this seems to be the case for the judiciary. If indeed those who have been taken into court have made a mistake, would want that to come out very clearly. The judiciary should speak out very, very clearly. You know, acquit where necessary and imprison where necessary as the law prescribes.
Of course, it's very hard to conclude this conversation, but I want to hear from City. City, your final remarks. Somebody made a joke earlier and said you've been here longer.
That is absolutely true.
Yes.
Yes, chronologically, I've been here longer, and I still have my teeth.
All right.
The question is, when you talk of independence, if the Constitution affords you the independence, you have it. It's what you do with it. So do you give up your independence? Do you allow someone to encroach your independence? And if so, for what reasons?
All right.
Yes.
If so, for what reasons? Caroline, perhaps the last remarks in just 30 seconds?
I would say the space has opened up, social media, but change comes from people. So we've got to be willing to go out there, use the social media, use whatever platforms. It's us who are going to have to bring the change. And let's not waste this moment. Let's step up. Yeah.
Now let's step up. Your DP, your final remarks. 30 seconds only.
Yes, indeed, we have a chance. The SIGs have a chance, and youth have a chance. Going forward, take your word with you. The Constitution has given you that power. Exercise that power within the permits of the law.
All right. Thank you very much. Of course, Dan Paul is a development practitioner with experience in civic education and budget facilitation. Caroline Nyamu, who is a governance and human rights specialist with a strong interest in social accountability work. I know this continues. And CT, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
For being part of this conversation today.
Thank you.
I think you're going to tell me thank you as well. We're
well,
literally here together.
Angie, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, we want to hand this over to the news diary. But remember, with the freedom comes responsibility. My name is Anki Dorisombat. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. Our job is exactly that. Keep you informed, give you the education, and the decision lies in your hands. Have a good day.